Hi, everybody. Welcome. It's Adrian CryptoBirb speaking. Welcome to the Nest Show podcast. This has been quite a little bit of a tiny break that we had some vacation here and there within our guests as well schedule, because there is always this certainty that I try to bring to the show that whoever comes in is always of the top shelf, is always of the biggest professionals in the field. And this is no different today because I have this honor and pleasure to welcome to the show Natalie Brunell, who is also coming with a couple of surprises that I just basically discovered myself, but I cannot really wait to see what we have about Bitcoin discussions for the show. Natalie, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm doing well. How are you? Yakshamash.
I'm Yakshimash. Wow, I'm already surprised. For everybody, just before the show, I found out that Natalie also had the like basically roots, Polish roots. I myself Polish, and me figuring out like a minute right into the show that Natalie had also had Polish roots is something that I wasn't prepared for. So you may see a little bit of excitement that I cannot hide because it's true. Natalie, there's been tons of success on your account. You're the host of Coin Stories Bitcoin podcast. You're a media commentator, host of Hard Money Show. You're an investor, educator, writer, Emmy winning journalist. And this is all within, I would argue a very short career. It does seem, right? This is what at least I could say. It looks that it really serves you well. And why don't you talk to us a little bit about your background story? How did it all happen to be this successful person that you are today?
Oh, well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Yeah, I was a journalist for 10 years. My background is I was born in Poland, immigrated to Chicago area when I was 5 years old with my family. And I always wanted to work in media because when we were very young, my family watched a lot of news in order to help them learn English. So we always had, Barbara Walters and Oprah and all the news shows on. So I really wanted to work in some capacity in media or journalism. I thought it was a really noble, beautiful profession. So I went off to school. I studied journalism. I have a master's in journalism. And then right as I was graduating, the financial crisis hit. And so that was a really pivotal moment for my family because they lost everything in the financial crash. They had just been able to afford a house for the first time, and then they lost it. And so I started my career in journalism kind of with this feeling in the back of my head, like, something is wrong with this system. Because how can you work really hard just to achieve the American dream and then lose it overnight because of things that are totally outside of your control and something that the government and Wall Street is doing? So I became a journalist. I worked my way up from small markets to bigger cities to national. And that's where I got my experience, which is helping me a lot now that I talk about Bitcoin. It was really interesting being a reporter because I saw a lot of the problems in our country and in our society at large just growing bigger and bigger and bigger. So every year, I would cover a politician or an election saying, I'll fix this problem. I'll spend a bunch of money, or I'll give you, I'll be the one that hands you this check, and I'll fix the problem. And every year the problem would get worse, but the politician would keep his job or even get promoted. And I just thought, what a crazy system we live in. And I think as things get more and more difficult to afford, especially for young people trying to afford a house or to pay off their school loans, I think our country starts to become more divided because people don't know who to blame or what to blame. So they start, picking teams and picking sides. And I would report on all of this. And then I discovered Bitcoin in 2017. And it took me a little while to really understand it. I was like so many people, I was like, this is probably, going to be hacked or go to zero. And then 2 years later, I started to really study it. And then I changed my career. I decided that I wanted to focus completely on Bitcoin and educating people about it, talking about it, how it can fix our financial system. And the rest is history.
Whoa. You just made this entire rap in about like 5 minutes, maybe cap, about this beautiful, marvelous story, and I already appreciate it. And by saying, I was expecting yours overall story to be rather condensed than going for many years, is by how many actually success-packed days you do seem to have. And I'm talking about like this never-ending shows that you have with the Hard Money Show, of course, of yours, There is like this tons of interviews I can see you do also on a almost on a daily basis or on a weekly basis with Charles Payne, if I'm not mistaken. So one success after another, and it all comes, with Fox business, and it does seem that you are a very well appreciated person in the industry. So I want to congratulate you on that,
Oh, that's so
definitely
nice.
for
Thank
sure.
you. I
By all
appreciate that. Thank
means,
you.
you're more than welcome, well deserved. Which takes me exactly to the next point, because I briefly touched upon your Hard Money show.
Mhm.
And well, why don't you talk to me a little bit and to our viewers about what that show is? I can see tons of guests coming in, and also this somehow maybe relates to this big grand prize reward that you received of Emmy. So talk to us a little bit more about that.
Oh, so Hard Money, I'm really excited about. It's basically our answer to, CNBC and the financial shows that are out there that don't really cover Bitcoin, or in our opinion, they cover it in a way that shows us that they don't really understand it. They conflate Bitcoin with crypto. And I just think that they see it as something that's more speculative as opposed to something that can really fix a lot of problems on a global level when it comes to transacting value and also storing value. So we decided to create a show. It's myself and an amazing crew from Swan Bitcoin. We put it together and we do original reports. We have live interviews, and then we do basically headlines. We cover both Bitcoin and what's happening in the Bitcoin space, and also macroeconomics. So we talk about inflation, what the Federal Reserve is doing, the cost of living around the world, housing, cost of education. So we kind of blend everything in almost like an orange pill, Bitcoin friendly news show. So I'm taking my background and kind of channeling it to this subject that I'm really passionate about. And it's a new show. We just launched it in July, but it took about 6 months of development. So really, really excited about that. And you can check it out on YouTube, on Swan Bitcoin's YouTube page. And I do that now in addition to my podcast, Coin Stories, which is really exciting. My Emmy was actually from when I was a newscaster. I was working as a general assignment reporter a while ago, and I won an Emmy as part of a team that covered a big breaking news fire.
Well, I mean, I hope you don't take it wrong, but I would really love to see the Emmy Award again if you have it somewhere. Do you have it somewhere with you?
Yeah.
You did mention it's
Oh,
pretty
it's a little bit
weighty,
blurry, but
right?
it's
I
very
I can
heavy.
see it
It's
perfectly.
like
It's
an
very heavy.
8-pound Emmy. Yeah, it's coming
Wow.
in a little bit blurry here. I'll hold it right here.
Uh,
Yeah.
it's amazing. Wow.
Yeah, it's
I,
really
I really, I
cool.
really, I really hope you do realize that this is a huge, huge title and an actual, I should say, gratitude, from many, many people in the industry. Congratulations. This is
Thank you.
huge, in my
Thank
opinion.
you. I appreciate it. It's so beautiful. I'm very grateful.
And it really suits well on your like within your apartment, I assume. Within your house.
My mom is
Uh,
very proud.
that this is what we all strive for, right? This is
Yeah,
this is what we want.
exactly.
Make
Mom
our,
and
our
Bobcha, you
parents
got to
proud.
please them.
Exactly, right. I love it. I love where it's heading already, and it's just been 5 minutes to the show. Oh, geez, let's go. Uh, well, in all honesty, of course, tons of media feature yourself, your works, your content that you produce on a daily basis. Also on Twitter, because some I would argue not some, but roughly around 250,000 people worldwide actually are following you online right now. A little bit to go there. Hopefully, this podcast accelerates it and puts it a little fast towards this breaking magical barrier and resistance. However, tons of media appearances are indeed on your daily schedule somehow, just like this very podcast. So I already appreciate it. But you do have experience, which I think many people fail to have or fail to understand, because we know, you and I know how we approach Bitcoin. Perhaps a little bit we can develop on that.
Right.
But visiting all those media stations, you likely meet different kinds of people who are interested about Bitcoin, but some of them are really like in Bitcoin or for Bitcoin. The others are really like against it.
Yeah.
How do really media look at Bitcoin?
Yeah, that's a really great question. It's so interesting when I've done these news hits about Bitcoin, it really solidifies the fact that we are so early because these media stations don't understand Bitcoin. I really give props to anchors that are taking the time to study it and learn about it. And Charles Payne is actually one of them. Like, he's really taking the time to understand both the technology and this movement, because there's a passionate movement and community behind Bitcoin. And so he's really one of the ones that goes into these topics and is fearless about that. Tucker Carlson was, I think, orange pilled a bit by some big Bitcoiners, including Michael Saylor. So he's doing a bit more on Bitcoin. But, at large, there's just so much more work to be done to educate journalists who I think play a big role in disseminating information. And I have to say, as someone who worked in corporate media and mainstream news for a very long time, financial literacy is really lacking, especially on the general assignment and local news and the news that you would, turn on and watch, like the average channel, like the basic news. People just don't understand how our financial system works, from the producers to the anchors to the reporters. And it's not necessarily their fault, because I think our education system doesn't teach us this, doesn't teach us what money printing is, or the history of why we have this type of inflationary Keynesian economic policy that rules. But, I think that it's incumbent upon them to understand it and learn about it now that this information is out there, the internet's out there, the information is free. You really could study it. That's what I did. I spent like 1,000 hours studying Bitcoin and the financial history of our country. So I think that when that starts to happen more, when there's more awareness and there's more education, then maybe Bitcoin will be covered in a more fair way. Because I think that right now, news anchors and media stations, they tend to latch onto the negative headlines. They tend to almost celebrate the fact that it's crashing, and they want to talk about the bear market and if it's going to zero, or they latch onto the FUD narratives about the environment or about nefarious activities or hacks. And that's really sad, because it's not painting the full picture and it's not providing the right amount of context. But I hope that'll change, and it's changing one by one. I mean, I'm a reporter who studied it, and I got orange pilled, and now I'm trying to orange pill everybody through my media background. So I think it'll happen, but it's gradually and then suddenly.
I love this orange pill actual reference. I love how you actually just make it so serious, because it really is serious. The facts, the points that you made, about, well, the actual economic language or literacy, the financial literacy, the knowledge that we should all be getting in school, it never actually comes through. Somehow it has this kind of like a feeling towards it that people consider it this hidden knowledge, this kind of like forbidden knowledge, this top shelf that you never are supposed to reach, right? This is what they teach us instead. So my point is that while there are lots of supporters, right? The regulators, the people who really create opinions, which is, well, very typical to media creators, to the media overall, is they tend to get reserved towards a little bit of it. So my question is, what is this one thing that I always argue the most about? Is it volatility? Is it that it's banned? Is it that it should be banned, but it's not? There's one thing that they really, think they could change about Bitcoin.
Yeah, I think that the biggest hurdle for media kind of accepting Bitcoin as this really great potential solution for our financial problems is probably the volatility, the fact that it's not what they consider to be a safe store of value or a safe investment, because it can go up by tens of thousands of dollars in a day or a week and then crash back down. So they don't see it as something that's safe or proven or an inflation hedge the way that we would, especially when we tell people to zoom out and make sure that you're looking at it as a long-term investment. I would also say that there's such a lack of knowledge about this space, because they're also conflating Bitcoin with crypto. So they kind of see, I think, Bitcoin as, okay, well, that's the one that has been around the longest, or it has the most name recognition, but any one of these other ones could potentially take it over. And that's really not the case. And it shows that they don't understand it as well. And they cover a lot of the other cryptos as if they're all the same. So I would think that those are the two things that probably need to change the most, is this idea that Bitcoin's too volatile and that Bitcoin is the same as crypto, which is not.
Is it exactly the same what you could change, if you could, actually, to that whereabouts of Bitcoin?
I mean, I wouldn't change anything about Bitcoin. I just want to change people's perception and awareness and education. I want people to wake up to the fact that they're placing blame on the wrong things. I feel like, especially in the US right now, we're so polarized, and you're either on team red or team blue. There's really nothing in between. Everybody's fighting constantly. Social media is an excellent platform to voice those opinions and frustrations. And it's really sad because they're fighting over the symptoms of the problem, and they're not understanding that the root is the cancer is the money. The money is broken. The monetary system benefits the few at the expense of the many. And if they focus their attention on that and taking the power of money away from these politicians and the state and the big banks, then maybe things could get a little bit better for them, and they wouldn't have to just vent their frustrations and think that one politician's going to fix it over another. It's like we look to these, candidates for president as our heroes. Like, this guy's going to fix it. Oh, he's not fixing it. We've got to go to the other team. This guy's not fixing it. We'll go back to the other team. And it's like, no, the system is broken. We need a rehaul. We need to fix it. And finally, we have a potential solution again through, I believe, Bitcoin.
I'm nodding all the time because there is so much truth and wisdom already that you've shared within such a short period of time. And I'm not surprised about your success, in all honesty. I mean, this is just pure truth and wisdom coming right from your side. And I'm asking about this one thing, that they could change, the media could change, about the people you talk to could change about their thinking of Bitcoin. Well, I myself know, for one, that the regulators, let's say myself originating from Poland, is not necessarily the most welcoming country to crypto, right? And as a result, tons of young people, engineers, creators, blockchain enthusiasts, and people who really push and give the thrust to the entire economic growth, right? They really leave the country. And it also comes paired with, right now, of course, recessionary environment, tons of recessionary threats, which are coming, with the overall slowdown. And the contraction, it's not a slowdown itself, it's an actual contraction, as we got confirmed globally. There is this galloping inflation that cannot be tamed in Poland. For reference, it was over 15% for states. Year over year for July was 8.5%, if I'm not mistaken. So let's actually dive and soak in a little bit more and broader into the next point, which is the investments. And having, like I said, crypto within this extremely difficult historical context of recession, of galloping inflation, where do you think crypto is right now in those terms?
Yeah. And you know what? I'm just going to say we should orange pill the president. We need to orange pill Duda so that he can, get more Polish people on the Bitcoin train. Because it's funny, my mom and dad grew up under communism in Poland. And so they really appreciated hard money. They were gold bugs until they started to read about Bitcoin and how it solves many of more problems than even gold does through technology. So we just got to get more people involved. But that being said, we are in a crazy macroeconomic environment because liquidity is kind of draining, and there's the Federal Reserve, which is, really the bank for the world. It's stuck between a rock and a hard place. They need to somehow fight inflation and raise interest rates, but that makes the debt and obligations difficult to service, and it potentially leads us down the path of a bust as companies liquidate, and potentially there's defaults because there's so much leverage and debt in the system at large. So what do? They're walking a very fine line, and our world is it's so global right now. So everything, I think, moves a little bit slower. Like, we should have probably had a deflationary bust a while ago, but we can keep kicking the can down the road for a long time, it seems. So I think the next couple of months to year it's going to be really interesting. Right now, we already have so many recessionary indicators, including, unemployment starting to creep up. We have supply chains that still have so many issues. We have an energy crisis playing out in Europe. We have, housing affordability with mortgage rates going up, like housing inventories skyrocketing. People are affording homes less and less. So I think the next couple of months are going to be very, very choppy. And at some point, the Federal Reserve will have to either pause or pivot because we just can't service our debt with high interest rates. And that's the only thing really that will fix inflation, but it's the thing that we can't really do to the extent we need because we're too leveraged. So I think that right now with crypto, it's feeling some of the pain at large. Bitcoin felt the pain of the Federal Reserve raising interest rates and trying to start to taper. But in the long run, this is really just a great accumulation point, in my opinion. It's really where the tide goes out. You see which projects have the ability to survive maybe another cycle with regards to the other tokens, and which ones are going to zero. And in my opinion, many of them are going to go to zero very quickly. So Bitcoin, I think, has been really resilient. It did not draw down as much as a lot of big stocks in the US did. I mean, Netflix, I think, drew down 80%. Bitcoin never went down that much. And I think that, again, right now is a good place for people to enter in, maybe their first time purchasing sats at a much cheaper level than when it was near the all-time high. And I think we probably have a while to go before we see the 60s that we saw last November. But again, I'm looking at this as my long-term investment. 4, 5, 10 years from now, I'm really confident that I will be in the green with Bitcoin, even though I'm down like so many other people, because I've been buying all the way up to its all-time high. So I'm not worried about it in the short term or in the long term, but in the short term, I think there's going to be more pain because we really are in a bear market and in a winter.
Gotcha. And it makes perfect sense, in all honesty. And, I have this problem so far because I wish there was just one tiny point that I could disagree with to roll on the debate with you, but this just cannot happen. I mean, again, there is this very interesting point, like from myself, the market analysis perspective, myself being, certified technical analyst, there were a couple of different lab experiments, if you will, on the economy classes or the overall way that the financial bubbles were created. And it does appear that the very people responsible for the financial bubbles to come up and really, put it to some extremes is the chiefs of the firms, as opposed to what I would personally expect. When I think about the markets and what the bubbles exist, my first intuition guess would be basically it's just the people, right? It's just the retailers that go in and flow into the market and just buy and take it off the shelf as soon as they can. But apparently it's all about the CEOs of the huge firms globally that really act with the biggest level of irrationality in the markets. They tend to overspend the tops and overspend in terms of pay the biggest quotes for the MEAs processes for the mergers and acquisitions, or they would just go really exuberant about their spendings and expenditures, also on their investments, which later just puts them on the far end and a very opposite extreme losses when the recession kicks in, which is why many businesses fail. But in all honesty, when you talk to those people, to those high level people, of the industry, again, tons of professors that you may exchange a couple of words with throughout the career, specifically about Bitcoin, is there really their push, this kind of like a real curiosity, this real interest that they get to have, or is it just blown out by media, as in they have to talk about it because the media want it, or is it just something of their personal interest?
I think that there's more and more interest, especially at an executive and leadership level, about Bitcoin, because number one, the performance has really spoken for itself, and a lot of people have made a profitable investment by adopting Bitcoin. But also, I just think that there's our monetary system, because money was so easy for so long, and the Federal Reserve was printing in response to the last financial crisis in 0809, we blew up really big bubbles, first in the real estate market and then in equities. More money last year poured into equities than in the last 17 years combined. And what's interesting is it's not based on growth of these companies. A lot of them are zombies. They're not even making money. And companies are able to do those stock buybacks, which are very profitable for the executive teams and the CEOs. I think I saw a tweet the other day about Apple buying back like $500 billion of stocks over the last couple of years. I mean, that doesn't mean that the company was that much more profitable or grew and provided jobs and provided real, value to the economy. It's literally because where else do you put your money? You can't put it in the bank. So basically we've just made the stock market into a bit of a casino. And we've made it so that a lot of these big corporations can just buy up real estate and turn everyone into renters. It's super sad when you as you stretch the timeline out, how many effects there are, which crushes the middle class, crushes people who save, crushes the workers. And so I think that there is a natural interest from people in leadership positions about Bitcoin because it's money. They want to make money, obviously, and they've seen what Bitcoin has done. What's great about it, though, is like Bitcoin's great for everybody. You know, the retail investor will also benefit when they accumulate Bitcoin. If institutions come in, I think it will legitimize it more. It will create more on-ramps, although they need to work on legislation when it comes to fair accounting so that companies don't have to report, losses, because that hinders a lot of them from adopting it. But I really want the retail people to get in. I want the consumers, the average person, to have a chance, to save, to be able to accumulate an asset, because that's the only way that you can plan for your future now, is to have something that is scarce, that's going to go up in value, as opposed to your cash, which is just evaporating in value over time.
And just following up on this perfect point you keep making on and on, let me just real quick display this very great tweet of yours. We need an alternative system, and the system is Bitcoin, right? And this seems exactly what you seem to have tried to convey in the message while talking on the Fox Business to Charles. And big fan of yours, of course. So
thank you.
Talk to me why those people believe, or why they should believe that they need this alternative system. And this corresponds with what you just said as well.
Yeah, so that was a really great segment there with Charles. Basically, I was making the point that we are no longer in a system of capitalism where things are allowed to fail and risk is both rewarded and punished. That's a healthy system, right? The free market kind of decides what has value, and some things go away because they don't provide value. We don't have that system anymore. We have what I would call either crony capitalism, or even bigger than that, we have creditism. We just go further and further into debt. We expand the balance sheet, and all of that is just money printing and kicking the can down the road for future generations and taxpayers to pay, when we can really never service it. And so what happens is, in the near term, that creates a lot of, I think, it creates an illusion of wealth, right? Because you print up money and you can finance whatever you want to finance, or put it into stocks, put it into real estate. There's this immediate kind of growth and bubble, like a drug addict getting high. But at some point, there's a knock on the door, you have to pay the bill. And now we're printing ever more money in order to sustain the bubble. And the bubble's getting bigger, the wealth concentration's getting worse. And it really puts a downward pressure, I think, on society. And that's really sad. And so where do you go from here, right? Because you have to print ever more money in order to just keep the bubble going. And if you pop it, that's devastating. That's like a depression, far worse than what was experienced in the 1930s, because there's so much debt to be washed out. Or you just keep printing and printing and destroying the currency. And that's the direction we're going in. So what's the way out? Like, what's the escape valve? We have none. We're not going to go back to the gold standard. Oh, wait, we do have a solution. Through technology, we have Bitcoin, a scarce, decentralized, open source protocol, censorship resistant money. You can send value from one part of the world to the other. It settles almost instantly, almost free on the Lightning Network. I mean, it's incredible that we have this at the time that we really need it. I feel like there's almost providence in the fact that it was invented just out of that last financial crisis, when we really, really needed it, and went in a direction that I don't think is reversible at this point with so much debt. We're in a debt spiral, as Greg Foss says. So I see Bitcoin as really that life raft. Like, this ship is sinking. We might still have years, tens of years. I don't know how long we can keep the can, going, but the ship is sinking. It's hit the iceberg. It's going down. Now we need a life raft, and Bitcoin, to me and so many people, is the life raft. And it's a peaceful one. It's one that everyone has the chance to start to get in on around the world. All you need is an internet connection.
Wow. Which exactly takes me to the very following point about the very future of Bitcoin. Having so much of the wisdom of yours, shared and experience, for where the adoption may be heading. Knowing there is also this opposing force coming from the regulators, which really hate, they would try to attack Bitcoin with everything they can, accusing that of money laundering, while at the same time, the biggest frauds actually happen via cash, right? So this is like a very, very funny hypocrisy they would have. But talk to me, Natalie, about your thought for the future of Bitcoin. Is it blurred or is it clear?
Well, I'm very bullish on it. I'm very hopeful because the politicians that are making these decisions and regulators, they have families too, and they want to save too. So once they come to understand Bitcoin, it's kind of that saying, once you really understand Bitcoin, you can't be against it unless you're truly a corrupt, evil person, right? And we have people like that around the world. But I ultimately think that the US especially is moving in the right direction and setting a precedent, recognizing that it is digital property, it is a digital commodity, and that basically you can't regulate or ban free speech. Code is free speech, and it is a form of property, as I mentioned. So I think that we're going to move in the right direction. We might have some hurdles along the way. We might have some countries that do what China did, but I think that that was such an amazing test for Bitcoin, and to show how bulletproof and resilient the network is, because the hash rate, the computing power went down. It decreased by like half overnight. And Bitcoin just kept producing blocks and kept everything just functioned as normal. Satoshi programmed it so brilliantly with the difficulty adjustment, which makes basically adjustments to the computing power and hash rate based on how many computers are actually competing to mine Bitcoin. So I think that that's brilliant. And I think that it would be as difficult to ban or control as the internet. You just can't. And if a country tried to do it, they would choke out innovation and entrepreneurship and investment in the space, and it would move somewhere else. And that's what people do, right? Just like how the billionaires here, they move their accounts to different offshore places and they have tax loopholes. People are going to do the same thing. They want to be able to keep what they've earned. So I'm hoping the government doesn't do crazy capital gains tax, because again, they're just going to push people out. But you can't stop Bitcoin. You can't shut it off like you can't shut off the internet. And that's what's so beautiful about it. It has no headquarters, no CEO, no governance, no nationality, no language. It's money for everybody. And I think that is why it's ultimately going to win long term, even if we have some short term regulatory battles ahead.
Thank God for it. Well, this is pretty well summarized already. And of course, I have a couple of different points laid out still before we wrap the show. But as we are getting closer, there is this one curiosity that I have for you. And there was, this is going to be a little bit of a parallel or a paraphrase to one of my discussions, that I had recently with some highly positioned people, of a very well prospering firm. And one of the questions we were discussing, were, imagine that a firm wants to go, basically tokenized, right? Then the question that they really asked me is, why cannot my coin really overthrow Bitcoin, right? Why cannot my coin that I create really, just top in the class Bitcoin? Why cannot it be the number one? How would you respond to it?
Yeah, so I would say two things. Number one, network effect is something that's really powerful, right? Anyone can create a new search engine, but try to become the next Google. Try to get everybody in the world to move from Google to your search engine, or create the new social media platform, right? Create the new Twitter and get everybody in the world on it. Once network effect really takes off, it's kind of unstoppable with the technology. So I think that's the first thing. The second is that Bitcoin is really the only blockchain that has proven itself to be truly scarce, truly decentralized, and truly secure. And there's a fantastic article that I recommend everybody read by Jeff Booth, who wrote Price of Tomorrow. He's a really prominent name in the Bitcoin space. He wrote an article recently called Finding Signal Through the Noise. And it's really about sort of the confusion that exists within the space at large about how there's so many cryptocurrencies. There's the Web3 and DeFi and all these projects. And especially for someone new coming into the space, it could be confusing, right? Because you're like, oh, well, Bitcoin seems too expensive. I'm going to bet on one of these other horses. And what you end up finding out is you're actually just going to a casino at that point. Bitcoin is infinitely divisible. You can buy little portions of it through Satoshis. You can buy, $1 worth of Bitcoin. And again, he talks about that triangle of decentralization, security, and scarcity. And the other currencies just don't have that. The other tokens don't have that. You either sacrifice decentralization, and so now all of a sudden we're kind of recreating the fiat system, or you're sacrificing security, or you're sacrificing economic value, because not everything needs a blockchain. It's actually very expensive to operate a decentralized blockchain, what a lot of these currencies or tokens or projects will find is it was just cheaper to do a database. But what's that? That's centralized. So there's a lot that I think is very nuanced, and it takes a little bit of research. But Bitcoin, it it still has to prove itself. Look, it's still only 13 years old, but for over 13 years, it has proven itself as the blockchain.
I love it, and this is exactly the way I was trying also to convey my very own answer to it. I think just of course, however, my opinion is not necessarily relevant to whatever Bitcoin decides to go. I think that because it's community driven, it's eventually community who really decides who's there in the top, right? It's not just as easy to come in and just disturb this entire network that you laid out here beautifully. And just make it disappear all of a sudden. There are so many different and strong connections within the network and outside of the network that cannot really, that I should say that these outside of the network effects also, somehow accompany that and make it, this entire, I should say, economy of Bitcoin within its ledger, that really helps it go and push forward, right? This is what really makes it scalable. And I could not agree more about that. And Natalie, of course, there is so much of the wisdom you shared throughout the show already. And I know I've got ton of respect for your time. So I wish we could take it much longer. However, we always have this custom where the VIP guest is always left with this final tip, this golden tip for all of our viewers and listeners. What would your golden tip for the viewers and listeners be today?
I would say think about the long term. Don't stress about what's happening in the near term, whether that's Bitcoin or something else that's happening in your life. I think we all need to zoom out and remember the bigger picture. Remember that the things that have value will rise to the top. Focus on, making every day the best that you can possibly be, knowing that things always get better. Bitcoin will have a bull market again. And whatever you're going through will not seem as bad 20 years from now, 30 years from now. So the big picture, you focus on the big picture, zoom out, and keep stacking Bitcoin.
When in doubt, zoom out. That's what they say. That's what Natalie Brunell, has also been trying to paraphrase with her amazing skills and wisdom and generosity of time and experience. Natalie, thank you so much for coming over to today's Nest Show podcast. This has been a pleasure and an honor, and so many surprises for the show. I got tons of excitement from my side. You can tell the laugh, the smile is not really coming off of my face. Thank you so much for coming to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Dziękuję.
Dziękuję bardzo. Ladies and gentlemen, Natalie Brunell, who also happens to have Polish roots, for my best surprise, host of Coin Stories, a Bitcoin podcast, media commentator, host for Hard Money Show, investor, educator, writer, Emmy-winning journalist, and so much more. This is all coming from one person, ladies and gentlemen. Natalie Brunell has been our guest today. Thanks so much, and I see you guys around on the next shows.